I put it on. Okay, last time we were discussing the 3 meals of Shabbos, and we said that the first 2 meals really have to wash. The third meal, Shalosh Hudis, because it says in the pasuk Hayem Loi Simsu Basada, you won't find it in the field. So therefore, many people are lenient with Shalosh Hudis to have cake or fruit or fish or according to Kabbalah, it could be ate even with Torah. But Lepel, the Rabbi writes even at Yom, even though we don't do Shalosh Hudis necessarily, but something you need to eat. And we said that if you eat, let's say, Shabbos before davening in the morning, and then you have lunch after davening, so then you have 3 meals, because the meal before davening is the Shalosh Hudis, and then you have the actual meal that you have. Okay, now, what happened, L'chatchila, even though it doesn't work usually like this in Chabad, L'chatchila, you're supposed to have the second meal of Shabbos, meaning the Friday night is the first meal. Remember, we learned last week what happens for whatever reason is somebody cannot do a meal Friday night, so then they have supposed to have 3 meals on Shabbos day itself. So you're not supposed to have the second meal of the day, meaning lunch, so to speak, after, preferably not after midday. But again, in our circles, we don't, we're not into that. Okay, now there's also another thing, by the way, that says you're supposed to have, where was the minhag of cholent coming from? Cholent. Okay, by the way, cholent, besides the French word of it, but it also comes with shalon, means it slept overnight. Like Maim Shalonu, Maim Shalonu, they draw the water before sundown and then it stays overnight. So cholent, besides the French, there's a French meaning of it, yeah?
Yeah.
As a Zochman, there's a French meaning of it. No, this is not in the book. I mean, I heard it a long time ago. Shalon, I don't know. Anyway, bottom line is, it's enjoyment of Shabbos. It's enjoyment of Shabbos to have a hot food, and therefore a person should have warm food on Shabbos meal. Because we said last time, well, not last time, a while back, that of the 2 meals, Friday night and Shabbos day, Friday night is not as important as Shabbos day. The Shabbos day meal is more important than the Friday night meal. Therefore, it says in Halacha, if you have better food, like you don't know when to serve it, halachically you should serve it Shabbos day, because that is the more important meal. In fact, the reason why we make Kiddush during the day, even though really there's no logical reason to make Kiddush during the day. We make Kiddush because the Torah says, Zochei Sema Shabbos Katshehu. You have to remember the day of Shabbos to sanctify it. Now, when do you sanctify, and this is important also for Havdalah, when do you what's sanctifying a day mean? It means you make the day different. It's different than the rest of the week. So when do you do that? When Shabbos begins, which we call Kiddush, and when Shabbos ends, which we call Havdalah. So you have the verbal Havdalah and Kiddush and the wine Havdalah and Kiddush. The bottom line is, in the middle of the day, there's actually no purpose in making Kiddush, because we're sanctifying Shabbos in the middle of the day. And also, as we know, Kiddush Friday night has Beri Priagafen and a bracha afterwards. Havdalah has Beri Priagafen and a bracha afterwards. And the Shabbos morning Kiddush is just Beri Priagafen. So what's the origin or what's the reason why we have Kiddush? But it's a very strong Kiddush, right? You're not allowed to eat before Kiddush, and you have to have Kiddush Mokum Suda, and you have to have all the things that we learned about. But it says in halacha like this, because the main meal is during the day, it doesn't look right that the Friday night meal, which is less important than the Shabbos day, has Kiddush, and the Shabbos day meal doesn't. So the Chachamim said, just Beri Priagafen, they're not making extra brachas, right? So they're just saying, you make a Beri Priagafen, and that's it. But that's where the concept of Kiddush comes. In fact, some people also have a minhag of eating fish. B'chal, in the Shalah, it says each meal on Shabbos you should have fish. So if you're, let's say, eating a Shalosh Hudis, ideally you should have fish. Some people have, the Hungarians are into this, ayim and tzvibel, eggs and onions that they eat Shabbos. These are all various different customs that people have of what they eat on Shabbos day.
Is that an Indian to eat eat cholent because to prove that we can have warm food on Shabbos, something like this, because
it has to do. No, there's another reason, because the Tzedukim said le'sevadu eish b'chomesh v'seichem b'yom HaShabbat. They didn't believe in the oral Torah. They took every pasuk literal. When they said put on tefillin between your eyes, they put tefillin in between, over here, between the eyes. By tzitzis, it doesn't say in the Chumash to wear it, it says to see it. So they hung up on the wall and they looked at the tzitzis. Okay? Now, the Torah says by Shabbos, le'sevadu eish b'chomesh v'seichem b'yom HaShabbat, that you're not allowed to light a fire. So Chazal say what it means in the oral Torah, you can't create the fire. But it doesn't mean you can't have a fire on, you can't have lights on, or a crock pot on, or a blech on, if it's done correctly according to Bishul. So then, to show that they're wrong, there's another reason brought down. Why do we have cholent? Because we want to show that they're wrong and we could have heat, fire on for the duration of Shabbos. Then develops something else. You eat the heavy cholent, and then you go to sleep, and you wake up, it's like tchias ha-mesim. It's like the resurrection, because it's so unhealthy to eat a heavy cholent and then go to sleep, and the fact that you wake up to show that Shabbos shows the concept of tchias ha-mesim. Okay. Okay, if you drink wine during the meal, it's also good. Shalosh shudis should be eaten half an hour after midday. Halachic hours, okay, again, it's not, we're not required according to the way we hold it, based on the Alter Rebbe and Shulchan Aruch also, we don't eat, you don't necessarily have to wash for Shalosh Shudis. Okay, you could be ate with fruit, you could be ate with mezainis, you could be ate with a lot of other things. Well, there's an interesting thing, and don't ask me what it means. It's brought down in Svarim, that why is there an inyan of eating fish on Shabbos? It says because the neshamas is brought down in.
Yeah, I saw, but what does it mean?
A lot of neshamas of tzaddikim are reincarnated into fish. And when you eat the fish, you elevate those tzaddikim. What does it mean? I haven't the faintest idea. That's what it says in the books.
No.
That tzaddikim's neshamas are. But we said already, I don't know if I mentioned maybe a few months ago when we were still having class, that all the foods of Shabbos equals 7. All the foods of Shabbos that you eat equals 7. Dog, fish, is Daled Gimel, 4 and 3 is 7. Challah is 8, 30 and 5 is 43. So again, challah equals 4 plus 3 plus 5. I'm sorry. It's what? No, it's 43. So 4 and 3 is 7. Marok, which is soup, Mem Reish Kuf is Reish is 200, Kuf is 100, and so it's 340. So 3 and 4 equals 7 also. Yayin is 70, which again equals 7. All the foods that you eat on Shabbos add up to 7. Whatever. Okay, next. What happens, this could be a practical din, by the way. What happens if you're eating shalosh shudis? Okay, you started Friday, Shabbos afternoon, you're in a shul, let's say, whatever, and they're serving shalosh shudis. And then you wash before Shkia, and then you're eating the meal, and it's extending into the night. And that night is Rosh Chodesh. Now, do you say Ritzei for Shabbos? Do you say Yalav V'Yavai? Do you say both? Like, what do you do? So there's a bunch of different opinions. So, our minig, the Rebbe writes, our minig is that if you eat the kazayas after nightfall, let's say for argument's sake, Shkia is 6 o'clock, sundown 6 o'clock, and nightfall 6:30, and after 6:30 you eat a kazayas of challah, so then you would make, say, Ritzei and Yalav V'Yavai.
Even if you haven't made Havdalah?
I'm saying only if you didn't make Havdalah. You're extending a Shalosh Shudis. You have a Shabbaton, whatever. You extend.
Have another kazayas?
If you have another kazayas after nightfall, then you can say Yalav V'Yavai and benching. If you didn't have another kazayas after nightfall, then you can't say Yalav V'Yavai, you just say Ritzei. But
But isn't it still
What's that? But what happens in middle of...
It's already light, it's already Chodesh. The moon is according to what we're doing.
No, but what happens if you daven Ma'ariv in middle of Shalosh Shudas? Then you didn't bench yet. And in the middle of the meal, you benched. That's it. So you made Havdalah.
Havdalah or you daven
You daven Ma'ariv, well, because in Ma'ariv you say Atachan Antonos. It's
But how
the...
can you if he's still in Shabbos? He's
One
still
second.
bench.
If you daven Ma'ariv in the middle of the meal, according to the Alter Rebbe, even more, if you say Baruch HaMavdil Ben Kodesh L'chol during the meal, then you can't say Ritzei anymore. Because now you're contradicting yourself. But if you didn't say Baruch HaMavdil, you didn't daven Ma'ariv, and then you're adding Shalosh Shudas, you start from sundown and you keep going. So if you eat a kazayis before and after, then you could say Ritzei and Yalav V'Yavei.
Okay, but if you're just eating not a kazayis, but you're eating other things, but not...
No, only a kazayis of bread.
Only, it's only fine.
Only, well, bread, challah, whatever, matzah.
But you can, even if you put the meal and it's and Shabbos is technically over, you could daven Ma'ariv, but you're still in Shabbos and you're still eating the meal. You could daven Ma'ariv.
Well, once you daven Ma'ariv, you could do malacha. If you say Baruch HaMavdil,
And it's still-
but then you can't say Ritzei anymore because you made it no more Shabbos. So if there's no more Shabbos, you...
For Havdalah,
Huh?
but you can eat for Havdalah.
I'm saying if you made Havdalah. No, once you say Baruch HaMavdil, then you can't eat until you make Havdalah.
But you haven't stopped, but you haven't benched yet. So you still have to bench.
You still have to bench, and then you can't eat before Havdalah.
But are you still in Shabbos?
What?
Until you finish benching, are you still in Shabbos? So you can't say...
It's enough Shabbos because you began when Shabbos was still going on. So therefore you could say Ritzei in the benching because you began when Shabbos still existed. Okay. Now, by the way, if somebody forgets Ritzei, Friday night, Shabbos day, basically, and you forgot it completely, you started the fourth brach or whatever, you have to repeat benching. Friday night more than Shabbos day. The question will appear what we do because the Alter Rebbe in not in Halachos Shabbos but in the first chiluk in Kupei Ches, the Alter Rebbe the Maril, the Alter Rebbe's brother writes, because the Alter Rebbe says like that over there, he writes that if you didn't say Ritzei Shabbos day, you have to bench over. Okay, let me explain a general din. Let me clarify a din that'll make a lot of this understood. If you have an obligation to eat bread and you messed up in the benching, Ritzei, Yalav V'Yavei, whatever it may be, you have to repeat the benching. If you don't have an obligation to eat the bread and you forgot whatever it is, you don't repeat the benching. For instance, on Rosh Chodesh, you say Yalav V'Yavei in the benching. But there's no obligation to eat bread on Rosh Chodesh. So therefore, if somebody benched on any Rosh Chodesh and left out Yalav V'Yavei, you do not have to repeat the benching because you don't have an obligation to eat bread. Okay? Shabbos, there is an obligation to eat bread. Yom Tif, there is an obligation to eat bread. So therefore, if somebody forgot Ritzei, when you have an obligation to eat bread, you have to repeat the benching. So in Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe writes Friday night and Shabbos day. Shalosh Shudas, even though you washed, but the fact is you don't have to eat bread for Shalosh Shudas. We said before, you could be yates of cake, fruit, whatever. So if you don't have an obligation to eat bread at Shalosh Shudas, so then the din is, if you forgot to say, you don't have to repeat the benching. One second. I'm going to get to you. Rosh Hashanah day, it's interesting. The Alter Rebbe writes, if you forgot Yalav V'Yavei in benching Rosh Hashanah day, you don't repeat the benching. Why? Because according to many opinions, you're allowed to fast on Rosh Hashanah day. Not at night, but during the day. So the Alter Rebbe writes in Shulchan Aruch, in the first chiluk, when he talks about benching, the Alter Rebbe writes that if you forgot to say Friday night and Shabbos day, then you have to repeat the bench. That's what Dal Rebbe writes over there. On the side, there's a comment from Dal Rebbe's brother, whose name was known as the Maril. Okay? He writes, Shamati mimenu, I heard from my brother, that at the end of when Dal Rebbe was older already, he changed his mind, and he said, you don't need bread Shabbos day. You don't have to wash Shabbos day. If you don't have to wash Shabbos day, so then you don't have to repeat the benching if you forgot to say. There's a whole discussion with the Tzemach Tzedek, there's a Tzemach Tzedek on this, there's a whole Megillah if you have to wash for the second meal of Shabbos, meaning lunch, basically, what we call lunch. Shabbos, there's a whole argument in halacha whether you have to wash or not. We mentioned last time, or before that, the Rebbe did not always wash Shabbos day. It's known. I mean, the fact is, he couldn't have washed. Okay, during the winter Shabbosim, the Fabrengen, the Rebbe didn't wash before the Fabrengen, and the Fabrengen went until after Shkia, and then they daven Mincha, and then they daven Ma'ariv, and then everybody went home to eat. Okay, so obviously, but we said, Malav and Malka, the Rebbe was very strict in washing, but not the meal during the day. There's a very interesting, by the way, so the same din seemingly is Yom Tif also. Let's say on Sukkot, or whatever, you benched and you didn't say Yalav Yavai, because Yom Tif you have a chiyuv to eat bread, you're obligated to eat bread, so then if you forgot the benching, you have to repeat the benching. There is a Rabbi Kiva Eger, we don't pass like that, but there is a Rabbi Kiva Eger that says, interestingly, women don't have an obligation to eat bread on Yom Tov. So he writes in the tshuva, therefore, if that's what he held, but we don't agree, we don't know like that.
How would it be?
He proves it because Yom Tov is einig, it's different, and the women are not mechuyev in the mitzvah of einig. They have the whole thing there. So the Pearl, according to him, if a woman forgot Yalav Yavai on Yom Tov, she doesn't repeat the benching. But we don't hold like that, we hold that they do. Okay. Yes, I'm sorry.
It's my turn.
Yes, your turn all the time.
So what if you forgot to bench altogether? Because, like, let's say that you fell asleep or you, what
So
happens?
then there's a different din. Until when can you bench? The din in Shulchan Aruch it says, as long as you're still full from what you ate. Lepel, today's world, it goes, they counted 72 minutes.
How much?
72 minutes.
Oh.
It's an hour and 12 minutes. But, benching is sometimes biblical. People have to be very careful about benching.
So if you do go to 72 minutes, and
Huh?
if you go over the 72 minutes and you're still full,
If you're still full, then you can bench. If a person's having an extended meal, if a person's having...
Don't wake up to the next
Like
day.
when the Rabbi used to wash by the Fabrengens, Yom Tiv, the Fabrengen went out for hours and hours and hours. So the Rabbi ate a good chunk of challah at the beginning, and every so often during the sichas, the Rabbi would put a little challah into his mouth. Just even a little bit of cake or challah, whatever, that you should continue eating. Okay. Shabbat.
Seriously, but what do you do? I mean, like, do you just forget about it? And, like,
It
you just-
depends. If you wake up 3 hours later and you're not full anymore, yeah, you can bench.
So then it's over. You can't.
You
lost your-
transgress not keeping a positive commandment of the Torah to bench.
Right. I mean, that.
What happens if a man doesn't put on tefillin a day? Or a woman doesn't bench licht on her Shabbos? She goes on strike.
She adds another life.
Good, but that's just to make it more important for her to emphasize the importance that she shouldn't forget. But she blew the mitzvah is over.
Right. There's nothing to do with the cholent. I mean, not benching. I mean, to add a...
No,
Eat another cholent.
no,
You to take the whole cholent.
eat another challah instead, no.
Holidays,
That would be a problem for me.
or say an extra. No.
No,
There's no extra brachas that you can say.
no.
Okay.
But you blew a biblical mitzvah. It's like a man missing a day of tefillin. Or a woman missing Shabbos benching licht. Benching licht is rabbinic. Benching, if you're full, then is biblical.
Yeah, but I've had cases where, like, literally I had like such a bad migraine that my husband said, okay, you have to come, have Kiddush and watching, have a piece of challah. And then I'm like,
You probably didn't eat enough challah to bench anyway.
oh, okay.
He knows you.
Okay. Kiddush with the day we learned already those dinim. Okay, what's very important though, like we said, but it's mentioned here again. First of all, whether you stand Kiddush day, no, our custom is Friday night, the Rebbe writes we stand by Kiddush. Some people sit, we stand. Shabbos day, a lot of people sit, but the Rebbe officially writes the minhag is to stand. And the Rebbe used to stand by Kiddush when he made it privately. When the Rebbe made Kiddush Shabbos day, the Rebbe stood. By the Farbrengen, the Rebbe didn't want to. The Rebbe did stand up. By the way, he went up like this, you know. But if the Rebbe would stand up, the whole Olam would be standing, and it would be a balagan. So the Rebbe did it in a way that halachically he was standing, because he got off the chair. So it's halachically standing, but okay, our custom is lapel to stand. Okay, next Havdalah. Now, we said before that because the Torah says Zocher Yom Shabbos Lekatsha, you have to remember Shabbos when it starts and when it ends. So Shabbos you remember when you sanctify Shabbos by making Kiddush. Shabbos ends, so then we sanctify Shabbos by making Baruch HaMavdal, Havdalah ben Kiddush L'chol. Now, biblically, verbal Havdalah is enough. What's verbal Havdalah? You say Baruch HaMavdal ben Kodesh L'chol is verbal Havdalah. Or you say Atoch and Antonu in the Shmoneh Esrei, that's called verbal Havdalah.
So that's enough? We don't have to do with the...
I didn't say that, relax.
Okay.
If you say Kiddush, if you bench Shlich, you say Ladik Nesh Shabbos Kiddush, you did the mitzvah of Kiddush biblically too. You still have to do it over a cup of wine.
Or tea, or beer.
A cup of wine. Let's leave it at that meanwhile. We'll get into what you could do it on. Okay, so now, technically, if somebody said Baruch HaMavdal ben Kodesh L'chol, they already did the mitzvah biblically, and Chachamim said you need to do it over a cup of wine, rabbinically. Okay? Some poskim say the whole Havdalah is midrabanan, but we paskin it's min HaTorah. Now, when they made the Anshe Knesset Gdela made the Siddur, so the Anshe Knesset Gdela instituted Kiddush and in the Shmoneh Esrei by Yikadesh Yisrael Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos, and they also instituted in the davening Havdalah. Okay, we say Atoch and Antonu and so on and so forth. Okay, now okay, now if somebody, let's say women don't daven ma'ariv too much, but let's say a woman's davens ma'ariv and or a man davens ma'ariv and he forgets Atoch and Antonu. He forgot Atoch and Antonu in the Shmoneh Esrei. So the din is you don't have to repeat the Shmoneh Esrei. You have to say Baruch HaMavdal ben Kodesh L'chol. Then you're fine. What happens though is a very interesting Allah. Now Rebbe brings down. What happens if somebody left out Atoch and Antonu, they didn't say Baruch HaMavdal ben Kodesh L'chol, and they did something forbidden on Shabbos, like they turned on the light or started a car or did something, then they have to repeat the Shmoneh Esrei. The only time you don't have to repeat the Shmoneh Esrei is if you didn't do any malacha. So then you say Baruch HaMavdal ben Kodesh L'chol and you did it. But if you did malacha, it's biblically forbidden stuff on Saturday night before you made Havdalah, so then the din is you have to repeat the Shmoneh Esrei. Okay.
It doesn't apply to us because we don't know in matter anyway.
Who? The women. Some women have a marriage. There's creatures like that exist, not too many, but there are a few creatures like that exist.
No, but if we don't have a marriage, then
Then you, but you have to say Baruch HaMavdal.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now, ideally, you're supposed to make Havdalah on wine. Okay. In fact, there were people. There's a whole story of Dr. Lovitch in Long Beach, right? The Rebbe told him to make a problem with his eyes, and And the Rebbe told him to make Havdalah on red wine, not grape juice, red wine. But it's very interesting. The Rebbe was pretty... Havdalah.
Yeah.
The Rebbe, and this guy's got better, so it was printed up, and it was the number one, it was on Living Torah once. And then my story, I think it was also there. But the Rebbe personally didn't like grape juice, B'chlal. I mean, to make Kiddush, and I'm not talking about the taste, I'm saying, the Rebbe didn't like the idea of making Kiddush or Havdalah on grape juice. Because l'chatchila, wine is more praiseworthy. In fact, like we mentioned, when the Rebbe had his heart attack, the night of Shmini Atzeres, and they wanted the Rebbe to drink orange juice, and the Rebbe was in his room, and he said, no, you have to eat in the sukkah. So they took the Rebbe out to the sukkah, and then the Rebbe said, you have to make Kiddush. Right? You can't drink before Kiddush. So then they brought the Rebbe grape juice. The Rebbe said, you don't make Kiddush on grape juice, make Kiddush on wine. So he brought the Rebbe wine. You make Kiddush on wine, and then whatever. But the Rebbe B'chlal was very pro-wine versus grape juice or anything like that. But if somebody can't drink wine, then they can make Havdalah on grape juice. Or anything called Chamar Medina. Chamar Medina literally means the drink of the land, which Halachos is questionable exactly what it means, but it has to be a prominent drink. It can be soda, according to most opinion, orange juice, or anything like that. It has to be a drink that you would invite somebody over to your house to drink. Nobody says to their friend, come to my house for some orange juice.
Can I say something funny?
What?
I have a nephew who's allergic to grapes.
Yeah.
So when he was getting married, the rabbi, guess what fruit of the vine he used for the wedding? Was it chuppah? For the chuppah?
I don't know.
Tomatoes. Because it's a fruit of the vine. He got married over tomato juice.
Imagine stepping on
It's
that
kind
wine,
of
right?
It was a Rav or a rabbi that did the
A
wedding.
rabbi.
I mean, it's like wine. Wine is usually white.
Hope it didn't stain, they usually use white under the hood, right?
You know, it's like,
That's very funny.
I said, I told you I want to tell you something. Does it count? So are they really married?
You ever invite? No, Ramesh finds it, by the way, from all the poskim that discuss the definition of Chamar Medina. In my opinion, he says it very clear and very practical and very simzach. You know, he says what's called a prominent drink. A drink you would invite somebody over. You tell somebody, come to her for a cup of coffee, come for a cup of tea. That you say. You don't say, come for some Coke. And that's it. I'm not talking about the Coke, marijuana Coke. I'm talking about tea is okay, but again, even those things like tea and coffee, you can't have it cold, because then iced tea is not a prominent drink. You don't invite somebody for iced tea. Okay? If it's too hot,
Drink it hot.
1 second. If it's too hot,
Invite someone for tomato juice.
if it's too hot, you can't drink it either. So it says tea and coffee. By the way, the Rebbe and the Shabbat and the Alter Rebbe both passed away Mitzvah Shabbos, and they made Havdalah on coffee. I can't remember what it was, either coffee or tea. But well, you have to have the tea and coffee in a way that it's very warm,
But you can drink it.
but you could drink it in one shot.
Right.
You can't be boiling hot because then you're not going to be yotze. You can't have it cold because then it's not prominent.
Okay.
So it has to be a mixture of prominence that you could drink right away. So it means very warm.
Well, but then you could do it on mashke, right? So,
Mashke is not Chamar Medina.
It's not for me.
I know, but a lot of people do mashke. So
Not Havdalah. They do Kiddush by day.
beer.
And the Rebbe writes in a letter not to make Kiddush and Mashke even during the day. Beer. Once a year, the Friedrich Rebbe used to make on beer, Havdalah, and that was Motzei Pesach.
Wow.
Friedrich Rebbe drank beer. Okay? Motzei Pesach, as I state in the Friedrich Rebbe made Havdalah on beer, and he said, why is he making a beer? He didn't have it for 8 days, and it was very prominent to him. Choshev.
Where did you get a beer? Let's say,
That's right.
First of all, once you buy back the chametz, you can bring the bottle of beer from the store. You can take it from your chametz. What's the big deal? You buy back the chametz. You make Havdalah. What's the?
So easy.
Huh? Okay, let's go to Tanya.
Wait, I have one more question.
Oh,
Can I ask one more question?
yeah.
So, when you're making Havdalah, my husband insists that you don't put down the fish at all. You don't ever put it down. You just hold it the whole entire time. Everybody else I see puts it down and then picks up the stuff. But my husband.
Oh, you're talking about next week.